In the days when Calabar was a land of shadows and whispers, where the sun burned fierce and the earth drank the sweat of the poor, Ituen lived as the sole joy of his aging parents. He was their only child, a youth of striking beauty, his frame tall and strong, his skin gleaming like polished wood under the morning light. Yet poverty clung to them like dust, and Ituen, grown to manhood, had little to his name but hunger. Each day, as the marketplace of Calabar bustled with traders hawking yams, fish, and bright cloths, he wandered its edges, his empty bag slung over his shoulder. When the crowds dispersed, leaving scraps of corn and bruised fruit scattered in the dust, he gathered what he could, his fingers sifting through the refuse for anything to ease the gnawing in his belly. King Ophiong ruled then, an old man whose years had carved deep lines into his face, his eyes dim, but his will unyielding. His palace, a sprawl of mud walls and thatched roofs, housed many wives, their laughter and chatter a constant hum. Among them was Atum, young and radiant, her beauty a flame that drew every gaze. Her cloth shimmered with colors of the forest, her beads clinked like soft music, and her anklets gleamed with each step, yet her heart chafed under the weight of her aged husband, his touch cold as riverstones. She yearned for a lover young and comely, a man to match her fire. In secret, she summoned her servant, a girl with sharp eyes and silent steps, and whispered, "Go through the town, search the market, find me a man handsome and strong, bring him to my side door at night, and I will let him in. The king must never know." The servant slipped through Calabar's dusty streets, her gaze sweeping over traders, farmers, and idlers. None met her mistress's measure. Too old, too plain, too weak. As dusk painted the sky in hues of fire, she passed through the marketplace, its stalls now empty, the ground littered with scraps. There she saw Ituen, his form lithe and powerful, bending to gather corn from the dust. His beauty struck her like a spear, his limbs sculpted as if by a god's hand. "This is the one," she murmured and approached him, her voice low and urgent. "The Queen Atum summons you," she said, her eyes gleaming. "She is taken with your looks and bids you come to her side door when darkness falls." Ituen froze, his heart pounding, fear clawing at his chest. "The king will have my life," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper, stepping back. "I cannot go." But the servant's words were honeyed, her promises of the queen's favor sweet, and after long pleading, he relented. "When night comes," he said, his voice trembling, "I will be there." As the stars awoke, Ituen crept to the palace, the air thick with the scent of night-blooming flowers and the distant hum of crickets. He knocked softly at the side door, his breath shallow, his hands shaking. Atum opened it herself, her form draped in a cloth vibrant as a sunset, her necklaces glittering, her anklets catching the moonlight. Her eyes drank him in, and she smiled, her voice warm as she said, "You are more splendid than I dreamed." She led him inside, her touch light but possessive, and called for her servant. "Bring water and cloth," she commanded, and soon Ituen bathed, the cool water soothing his skin, before donning a clean cloth that clung to his form. They sat together, her words soft, her laughter like a stream, and she hid him through the night, her heart alight with forbidden joy. Dawn crept near, but Atum's desire held fast. "Stay," she whispered, her eyes pleading, though Ituen protested, his fear sharp. "The king will find us," he said, his voice urgent, but her will was stronger, and she concealed him in her house, slipping him food, steaming bowls of pepper soup and fufu, and fine cloths in secret. For 2 weeks he remained, each night a dance of whispers and shadows, each day a gamble with death. At last, he could bear it no longer. "I must see my mother," he said, his voice firm despite her pleas. "She will worry, and I cannot stay." Atum, her heart heavy, relented but sent him away with a lavish gift, 50 carriers, 10 bearing 300 rods, the rest laden with yams, pepper, salt, tobacco, and bolts of cloth bright as the dawn. They marched to Ituen's village, the dust rising beneath their feet, and his mother, her face weathered by want, wept with joy at the sight. She embraced him, noting his fine clothes and healthy glow, but when she learned of the queen's favor, fear gripped her. "The king's wrath is death," she whispered, her hands trembling. "You must be careful, my son." Ituen stayed a month, tending the small farm, the earth cool beneath his hands, the air sweet with growing things. But Atum's longing burned, and she sent her servant to summon him back. "The queen cannot live without you," the girl said, her voice insistent, and Ituen, torn between fear and desire, returned under cover of night. Atum greeted him with a cry of delight, her arms encircling him, her house a haven of warmth and secrecy. But treachery stirred in the shadows. The slaves who had carried the gifts whispered to the king's servants, their tongues loosened by envy. In the dead of night, they burst into Atum's room, finding her with Ituen, their forms entwined in the torchlight. They seized him, binding his wrists with rough cord, and dragged him before Ophiong in the palaver house, where the air was thick with the scent of dust and judgment. The king, his face a mask of fury, summoned all Calabar to witness the trial, his voice booming across the land. 8 Egbo men, their machetes gleaming, stood ready, their eyes cold as stone. The trial was swift, the evidence damning. "You have betrayed me," Ophiong said to Ituen, his voice low and final. "The law is clear." He nodded to the Egbos, who led Ituen into the bush, the trees looming like silent judges. They bound him to a tree, its bark rough against his skin, and with a sharp knife, they cut away his lower jaw, the pain a white-hot scream that tore through the forest. They carried the bloody trophy to Ophiong, who nodded, his heart heavy but unyielding. Atum, learning of her lover's fate, wept for 3 days, her cries echoing through the palace, her tears staining the earth. Ophiong's anger flared, her grief an insult to his pride. "She defies me still," he growled, and summoned the Egbos again. They seized Atum and her servant, dragging them to the bush where Ituen lingered, his life ebbing in agony. The queen, her beauty now a mockery, had no defense. They tied her to a tree, the ropes biting her skin, and with a blade as cruel as the first, they cut away her lower jaw, her screams mingling with the wind. The servant, trembling, was spared the knife, but not the punishment. Her eyes were gouged out, leaving her blind, her cries a broken wail. All 3 were left bound, the forest swallowing their pain, starvation claiming them as the days bled into silence. Ophiong, his heart hardened, decreed an Egbo law. No kin of Ituen's family could enter the market on its busiest day, nor gather its scraps, accursed to mark their shame. But he spared the vulture, and the dog, lowly creatures unlikely to steal a queen's heart, allowing them to scavenge the market's refuse. And so to this day they roam the marketplaces, picking through the dust, while Ituen's name lingers as a warning of love's perilous cost.